Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Wound Care. Today I have I had an infected wound. Doctor had to cut it out. Now I got to change the bandage every now and again. And to change the bandage, I need to soak the wound for 10 minutes. So, in order to make the best use of my time, I am making a video every time I do that. Today I'm going to talk about the Texas floods. I realize that they probably happened quite some time ago at this point, but they happened yesterday and are still in danger of escalating as I make this video. This is a wet to dry bandage, which is supposed to help remove the injured tissue. You can see my thumb here is slightly swollen. It's not terrible at the moment. But, there it is. I don't really need to use the iodine anymore, or so the doctor says. But this is the last of it. Doctor gave it to me, so... I mean, essentially speaking, next time I go to the doctor, they may say, time to stop changing the bandage, just stop having a bandage. So, got to use up the supplies. While I do this, by the way, I will be doing other medical related things, such as taking my blood sugar and administering my insulin. I had this infection because I am a diabetic. I need 2 needle heads there. Okay. Alrighty. And I am going to need to... Alright. So... this stings a little bit, to be honest with you. Alright. Clunk. Timer is going. Wound is soaking. Alright. Now, this, by the way, is called a lancet. It is designed to permit me to draw a drop of blood from my blood sugar monitor. So, in Texas, what's happened is that there has been a terrible flood. People are dead. And the reason the flood is so terrible is it's after a drought, as it is Texas. You know, there's an old joke. This man looks up at the sky and he says, man in Texas looks up at the sky and says, "Dear Lord, let it rain. Not for me because I've seen it, but for my son, he never has." So yeah, certain parts of Texas are pretty dry. There's the blood sugar monitor. I've inserted a test strip, and now I'm going to clean my skin. Gnat crawling around there. Anyway. The alcohol on the skin can make the blood run, which will make it harder to take the test. Okay. Squeezed a bit to get a nice big drop. There we are. Okay. 188, not good. Just so you know that if I get blood on the lancet, I clean it off. But, so unusually dry conditions mean that drought is more, or that flooding is more likely. And that may seem counterintuitive, but what happens is that the dry soil essentially creates a plug or a cap that will not permeate. And as the soil will not permeate, the water cannot penetrate, and therefore less water is permitted within the system. Okay, drop that. These are insulin pens, by the way. You are required to clean the surface that the needle pierces, both on the pen and on the person. And then clear the air from the needle. Air in the needle can cause oxidization and bacteria on the needle because it goes through so deep. Can cause bad infection. All right. So now these need to be injected into fat, of which I have an ample supply. Convenient. Anyway, 15 units of this one, and they need to stay in my flesh for 10 seconds. The alcohol can make them sting a bit. To be dead honest with you. But yeah, the reason this flood was so deadly is because it was so bad, and it's an area that doesn't see a lot of flooding. And you might say, with a modern culture like ourselves, why can we not avoid these flooding problems? And, the answer honestly comes down to money. It's not cost effective. Like, you could do things, like I live in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is actually built on a floodplain. The Army Corps of Engineers came in and tweaked our aqueducts so that all the water runs off when we have a flood. So, there's not as much, because Los Angeles was twice destroyed by flood. So it's not as much of an issue for us now, all right? And it's like, yes, you could still do major things to prevent water loss, yet, not have such a problem with the flood. Like, for example, you could depress parks, okay? This would mean that you dig out the soil and make every park into a bowl that, in a flood, it would trap the water, okay? This would help with a minor flood, not a major flood, but if you did enough of it, it would help quite a bit. And the fact that this would turn your parks into lakes after the flood till all the water ran into the ground is annoying, but it's not a bad thing. And I mean, there's other things, more effective things, like there's new asphalt you can install that permits the water to permeate so that in a flood, the water simply goes into the parking lots and into the roads and therefore connects with the soil, and the water moves much faster that way into the ground and therefore creates much less of a flood. You can do those things, all right? You could create channels, in Texas particularly, you could create channels that would permit water to, flow into things like dry riverbeds or dry lake beds, and therefore catch the water, get it into the water table, and get it away from the cities. And I mean, to a certain extent, no matter what you do, you're not going to stop the problem, okay? Because the problem is big enough, it's going to come at you. And they say the planet's water cycle is getting faster. So yeah, it's hard to moderate floods. It's going to become harder and harder to moderate floods. They're going to become increasingly common and increasingly severe. What used to be a 100-year storm will now be a 10-year storm. That's just one of those things. So we have to deal with it. I mean, our world is changing. And yes, with enough money, I mean, you could build every house into a floating boat that when there's a flood, it just rises above the water. They do that. There are places where houses, are built on floodplains, and the flood happens and they're tethered to the ground, but they just rise above the water, and you float above the water till the flood goes down, and then you're fine. It's a thing. So there are places where that happens, okay? But it's like we have hillsides where houses are destroyed by floods. And it's like, yeah, well, you're on a hillside, so the water isn't going to stay very long, but it gets into the house and it destroys everything. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, I guess. What can one do? Truth be told, history shows again and again how nature points out the folly of men. That's the world that we live in. We have to understand the fact that no matter what, nature is always going to be able to kick our ass. We could build a building here or a building there that is nature-proof. But, we can't build a society that's nature-proof. Yeah, I guess this is designed to absorb a lot of fluid. That's kind of what a dressing does. Alrighty. This is the bandage itself. Dressings are sterile and go directly on the wound. Bandages are there to cover dressings. But yeah, humanity is a funny thing. And one of the things we're obsessed with is the ability to predict the future. That's actually why we have calendars. Because in the colder regions, it was rather important for us to know how long we had to last. So how much food, how much firewood did we need to put together to survive the winter? This ability assisted humans in colonizing more and more of the earth. But every now and again, nature is going to knock on the door and say, hey, remember me? Respect me, or I will destroy you. That's what we have to remember. The world is not an easy place sometimes. And we're just passengers on this giant rock hurtling through the universe. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. I'm Richard.
Background courtesy of Photographs of a Mad Richard. Link in the description.
Who should be commenting, liking, and subscribing? You should be commenting, liking, and subscribing. Danger Ducky says, if not you, then who?